As he mentioned, my name is Soundous Ettayebi. I'm an immigrant and settler here on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I'm grateful to live, work, and play on these lands. And like many immigrants before me, my immigrant journey was a bit of a bumpy one. My family came to Canada in 2004, and at the age of 10, this was already my family's 5th major move. I was struggling with feelings of loss of friendships, loss of familiarity, loss of my networks. When Baba, my dad, sat me down and said, "Soundous, you are a magnet. Wherever you go, you will attract people." Of course, as a preteen at the time, I didn't spend too much time thinking about what he was saying. It wasn't until later in my young adulthood that I reflected more on his words. Of course, he was right. I created networks everywhere that I went, and in doing so, I saw that those feelings of loss and loneliness were felt by many around me. So my brother encouraged me to work with more community-based organizations at my university. We ran events for new international students, created mentorship opportunities, and I led some social development programming in underserved communities. I remember after one of these events, a participant came up to me and told me that this was the first time that they felt like they were part of a community on campus. They felt like this was a space where they could be themselves, do something that they were passionate about, and meet new people, make new friends. This was the first time that I started thinking about this concept of belonging. Social psychologists say that belonging is an individual's need to belong within a social group. It seems so simple, yet many people never attain a sense of belonging in their classrooms, in their workspaces, and within their communities at large. So what is belonging, and how do we foster it? Through my own lived experiences and my different career journeys, I found that there are a number of ways of doing so. Today, I'll talk about just 3, and of course, these vary depending on the groups involved, how they relate to each other, and the overall setting. Firstly, members' identities need to be reflected in the spaces that they're in. If a person feels like they're the only one of their kind in a space, they tend to feel isolated. They might not share their opinion, they might not participate in a group's activities, and they might also be viewed as outcasts by other team members. In my last role as manager of Indigenous outreach, at UBC Gearing Up, my team's goal was to get Indigenous youth excited and engaged in science and engineering. We did this by incorporating engineering principles with Indigenous ways of knowing that the youth would have already learned through their parents, elders, and community members. We brought elders into the classroom, took the students out for land-based activities, and showcased existing Indigenous knowledge. Not only were the students more engaged in the programming we were delivering, they also saw the value and the use of their Indigenous cultures and their Indigenous knowledge. They were able to see that they fit in these spaces. As an equity and inclusion facilitator with Humanized Consulting, I work with a lot of companies to create more inclusive and open workspaces. And through employee focus groups, we see time and time again that employees want open communication channels within their spaces. Communication is a learned skill. It takes time to perfect, if we ever do perfect it. And we know that it's key to successful relationships, but we don't often spend the time to become better communicators. In my line of work, open communication involves giving organizations the tools they need to be able to manage difficult conversations. I also emphasize the importance of learning how to make a good apology. We all make mistakes, and so knowing how to make an apology goes a long way in how we humanize one another. And ultimately, these safer spaces allow for higher senses of belonging. Reducing judgment and practicing acceptance go hand in hand with belonging. As humans, we're constantly judging our environments, and this often leads to how we interact with folks around us as well. So when we can bring an open mindset to a space, a lot of great things can happen. Over the last 3 years, my friend Sara and I started an Arabs community group. The group's aim is to create a space where young Arabs can come together, showcase in each other's cultures, their languages, and try new experiences. We saw that people coming to these events wanted a space where they didn't feel judged. Knowing this, we've been trying to reduce as much judgment in these spaces, and seeing our numbers grow from 10 in 2019 to over 500 today just emphasizes the need of these spaces where people can share their culture, share their identities without fear of what others are thinking. So to recap, there are a number of ways of including belonging in your spaces. Can be incorporating folks' identities, open communication, and allowing people to show up as they are. In doing so, I've seen Indigenous youth more excited about their educational journeys. I've seen higher retention rates in organizations, and I've seen cultures being shown in a new and beautiful way. So belonging can be really simple, but very impactful, and it's at the core of everything that we do. So I encourage you to think about spaces where you feel like you belong and what creates that feeling. Take a look around you at the people who are in those spaces. Who isn't belonging, and how can you bring them in? Connectedness can be simple, and the outcomes can be anything from higher engagement levels, higher performance levels, and even reduced negative mental health outcomes like anxiety and depression. It can also lead to stronger, more connected communities. So I hope that this encourages you all to bring belonging and foster belonging within your own communities. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. And I'm excited to hear all the next ones to come. Thank you.